Hi, I'm Jake. I've been playing Magic the Gathering for nearly 30 years. And over that time, it's been a game, a collectible, a social experience, an opportunity for self-expression, a way to bring new people into our social circle, an opportunity to solve puzzles and find new ways to play. But every time someone asks me, what is Magic the Gathering? It catches me off guard because it can be kind of difficult to explain. And usually people aren't asking it quite so simply. They say, what is that game you play on Friday nights? Or what did your friends used to do during lunch in high school? Maybe they say, where does half your paycheck go? But however the question is asked, I think that's an interesting thing to explore. So today I want to talk about what is Magic? What is this game that we put so much time and energy into? And I'm going to explain it at a few different levels. So pull up a chair, have a seat at the table, and whether you're a button mash hack and slash controller bash, or a meeple moving mastermind of maps, mats, and minis, if you ruffle at the awful riffle shuffle scuffle, or if you're a click clack pick attack number ball luck sack, we're all here for the same reason. I'm Jake. Let's talk games. So let's start at the top. Explaining Magic the Gathering to somebody who is completely unfamiliar with card games or board games generally, I like to start by saying that Magic the Gathering is a lot like chess, right? Each opponent, each player has a variety of different pieces that each do different things. And your goal is to either take all of your opponent's pieces or back them into a corner and put them in such a bad position that they give up. And that's essentially what we do in Magic. We have a deck of cards, and each one of these cards is a different game piece that does something specific. And as we play the game, our cards are either going to deal damage to our opponent, destroy the things they have in play, or bolster our own side to make our position stronger. And as that balance of power shifts back and forth between the two players, eventually one player is going to be eliminated, whether that's they deck out or they lose all their life, and the other player wins the game. There's a lot of mechanics involved, but at its core, Magic is that simple. I would throw in there that there is a scaling power level in Magic the Gathering, where as the game goes on, more powerful cards can be played. So you need a balance of things you can play early in the game and things that are strong enough to be played late in the game. And so each person builds their deck in a slightly different way. Are you trying to play super fast with a lot of really cheap, quick cards that you can beat your opponent with before they can respond? Or do you want to hold out as long as you can to land those haymakers and close off the game in one fell swoop? Both of those strategies are valid, and both can be extremely effective. But Magic the Gathering, at its core, is a game. And so I like to start by explaining that gameplay. But what if somebody asks you about Magic the Gathering with a focus on the magic? Maybe they're coming from a video game perspective or Dungeons and Dragons, where it's more about, the lore and the story. See, I like to use the original description of Magic, right? Classically, in Magic the Gathering, you are a planeswalker, right? You're a being of near infinite power who explores different lands and draws energy from them to summon creatures and cast spells from across the multiverse. In these epic duels with your opponents, you can call on favor from other planeswalkers to assist you, to reduce your opponent's life total from 20 to 0, to clear out their library and leave them in that wasteland. Magic the Gathering is a game where you craft your library of spells. You assemble it into your deck of cards, and you try to send your opponent's cards to the graveyard. Magic the Gathering is dripping with lore, and I love it. The idea of playing Commander and forging a partnership with a legendary creature from Magic's history. This handshake agreement that you'll embark on the field of battle together to defeat the other legendary creatures that have been summoned, this kind of duel of characters from Magic's history. I think that's really exciting for people, and for those that are interested in that aspect of the game, you can delve very deep. You can recommend stories. The old Brothers War novels are excellent. The Ice Age books, that trilogy is really, really good. For the people that are looking for that, Magic is a really good place to find it. And so I'd encourage you to share that aspect of the game. And it won't work for everybody. This isn't something where you should engage with Magic as a live action role play, because ultimately it's not. It's a card game. But I think that lore and that flavor does really bring people into it. And it's something that tends to get lost in modern iterations of Magic. And even more so now that the multiverse has become so varied that we have cowboys and 80s horror movie themed sets. I think with the universes beyond and these other hooks into Magic, it can feel like a less cohesive world. But the reality is, when you say the game exists in an infinite multiverse, this is that infinite multiverse. And to tie those in with the lore and bring people in through that, I think is a really good way to get people involved in the game. But now let's move back to the mechanics of Magic and how we discuss the game for the people that have played these games before, the people that are familiar with trading card games and other mechanically complex interactions with people on the table. But how do we explain Magic the Gathering to somebody who's already familiar with trading cards, or board games more generally? I still like to start with the rules for mana, saying that each turn you draw one card, and each turn you can play one land, and use those lands to play other cards from your hand. So as the game goes on, you have access to more lands, and you can use those lands to play more and more expensive cards. Generally, the power level of a card is tied to its cost, so you get to more powerful stuff at the end than you have access to at the beginning. Now, obviously, you have to balance your deck to make sure that you have something to do at every point in the game. But I might go a little bit beyond that, saying each turn you can attack once. And so you declare all of your attackers at the same time, and so it can be a tricky game of deciding how much you want to commit to the attack, because you don't get a second pass at it. Additionally, I'd say that in Magic the Gathering, kind of uniquely, you attack the player. You don't attack what they have in front of them. This means on other people's turns, you have an opportunity to make a lot of choices. There's cards that you can even play from your hand on your opponent's turn to interact with the current gameplay. Most creatures have abilities that you can use, both on your turn and your opponent's turn. So there's still a lot of gameplay that can happen when it's not your turn. And when your opponent attacks you, you choose how you want to block. It makes the game extremely interactive. And there's a lot of rules in Magic, specifically how you interact with your opponent's cards when you are playing your cards. See, Magic uses something called the stack. And basically, whenever anything new is played, if it's at instant speed, it stacks on top of the current effect. And then things are removed from the stack in reverse order. One of the cool things that Magic has is a bunch of different card types that all have a little bit of overlap in what they do. You see, Magic is a game with 7 different types of cards. And the most important of those is land. They're not the most exciting, but every turn you can play one land. And as the game goes on, you can use those lands to play more and more powerful cards from your hand. And so the game scales, with fairly weak cards being played at the beginning of the game, and extremely strong cards being played at the end of the game. And the way you balance your deck between those 2 points changes the flow of the game dramatically. Now, within the other card types, there's two broad categories. There's permanent cards and non-permanent cards. See, permanent cards represent the majority of cards in Magic the Gathering. Once you play them, you cast the spell. They come into play and they stay on the board. Non-permanents are one and done. You cast the spell, and once it has done its thing, once the effect resolves, the card goes to the graveyard. There's a few cards in the game that allow you to bring those back, but for the most part, once you've had that effect, it's gone. And so the instants and sorceries, our two non-permanent types, tend to be a little more powerful, a little more targeted, a little more niche. Whereas the things that sit in play have some more broad uses. But all of these cards have a little bit of overlap. And that means if you need a specific effect, you have a lot of options to choose from. Not to mention, the game's been going for 30 years, so there are a lot of cards to choose from. In your other permanent types, you have artifacts, which are generally colorless permanents that sit in play and have either a static effect or an activated effect that you can use. You have enchantments, which are colored permanents that sit in play, and those also have a static effect that affects either the entire table or just your side of the table or just one specific thing on somebody's side of the table. You have creatures that have an attack power and a defense toughness. And over the course of the game, you'll attack with your creatures to try to damage your opponent's life total, right? Then there's planeswalkers, which function a little like another human player playing with you. In this game, you are a planeswalker, and you can enlist the assistance of another planeswalker and use some of their spells. Each one has a few different options on it. But if you make them use their most powerful spells over and over, they run out of loyalty and they walk away. They go to the graveyard and you lose access to that planeswalker. Magic has a very broad design space, and it makes it a really cool puzzle to solve. On top of the types of cards, each card also has an associated color. And the colors of cards kind of dictate the style of play that you can expect from those cards. And when you build a deck, you typically want to restrict yourself to just a few colors, because if you get too varied, it can be difficult to make all of the right color mana from the specific lands that you need. So now that we've talked about kind of the broad strokes of Magic, and we've gotten a little more specific with the card types and the way that we play those cards, I think we need to move on to something that makes Magic really unique, and that is formats. There's a lot of different ways of playing the game, and a lot of them are officially recognized by the manufacturers of the game. Each tournament that you go to will have a specific format for that tournament, a specific set of cards that you can use, and in some cases, modified rules associated with that specific type of gameplay. Generally, in Magic, there are two broad categories. There is limited and constructed. So in limited, you are building your deck from cards that you get at the venue. Limited has a couple different categories. There's draft, where you pass cards amongst the other people at the table to craft a more specialized deck. And then there is sealed, in which you open your booster packs and you build your deck only from the cards within that sealed pack. That's usually how most pre-releases function. But on the constructed side, there's a lot of different formats. The general competitive formats are Standard, which is the most recent couple of years, roughly, of Magic cards that have been released. Modern, which is every Magic card since 2002. Pioneer, which is every card since somewhere in the mid-2010s. Then there is Pauper, which is cards that are only common, which means if you look at the set symbol, that set symbol has to be printed in black for that card. Then there are older formats like Legacy and Vintage that allow you to use your entire collection and tend to be extremely powerful, extremely competitive, extremely expensive formats to get into. And then you have some of the more casual formats. Right now, the most popular way to play the game is Commander. I attribute part of that to the way that they release starter product for Commander. It's really easy to buy a deck pre-made and jump into playing with some people you find at your local shop, but also it gives you the ability to use cards that you don't see in most other formats. You can use the weird stuff, the old stuff. It's not arbitrarily time-gated. If anything, it is encouraged that you use some of those older cards because of the way that the game works. It's a multiplayer format. It's one of the only multiplayer formats in Magic. And at its core, Magic is a game. And games are meant to be social. So Commander gives you access to the Magic the Gathering game rules, which are really good, and that social experience of sitting around a table with friends and being able to chat while trying to summon monsters from across the multiverse and beat each other to death. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. So I hope that if you're new to Magic, this has been helpful to show you a bunch of different perspectives on what the game is. And if you're not new to Magic, maybe you found a couple hidden gems over the course of the video. A couple more things that you can share with others when they ask you that age-old question, what is Magic the Gathering? Thanks for watching.